Hey everybody, getting ready to put a clutch back into a 1755 Oliver. One trick I do is I get a 7/16 fine threaded bolt. In this case I ground the head off. I need to find a longer one. This one really ain't quite long enough. But use it to give me something to hang the flywheel on, so I ain't trying to hold it in place or swing it around while trying to get the rest of the bolts in. I may even put a second bolt in there. Something I did when I took it off, I took a prick punch, made a little mark in the crank, and another one in the flywheel just to line the flywheel back up, because there's supposed to only be one way these go on. The bolt holes are not quite spaced evenly, but I've seen where guys have found a way to get the bolts in anyways and get the flywheel not marked right or lined up right, and then the timing marks on it don't line up when you're doing other work on either your gas or your diesel engine. So it's a good idea just to mark it. It makes finding the right holes right in the first place. You're gonna see these two holes are gonna stay empty. Older tractors, they use dowel pins, and I'm guessing in a cost-saving effort they remove the dowel pins, but I only gave you two options of lining it up wrong. One right, one wrong. But yeah, now it's just a matter of grabbing that flywheel and slipping it back on, but I do believe I'll grind another bolt head off just to make it so it stays lined up better. All right. See if I lift this baby up on here. Get my dot lined up. Let's see. Yep, dot. Get some bolts in it. If I was real smart, I'd have the wrench here. I'll go grab that. Okay, got my ratchet. Spin these on a little bit. I don't really care for putting some of this stuff together with power tools. It's got to be torqued to a certain amount. And then if you get a little carried away and things are cross-threaded, and you got a real mess when you mess up your crank. To me, a few more seconds with a ratchet will save you a lot of grief. Out my guide studs. Put in the other two flywheel bolts. Now I gotta go look up the torque. Now the book says 67 to 69 foot-pounds for all the 310 55 series engines, so that's 1755 through 1955. I'm going for the high end. You want to do them in a star pattern. It's like you're tightening a wheel. This might be where it's good to have a friend to keep the crankshaft from turning. I might have to find a pry bar to stick in here. Somewhere. There we go. Double check them. Hopefully you can hear the clicking of my torque wrench on there. Let it know I've hit my torque. Imagine a digital one would be nice, but this one gets the job done. Every now and then I'll check it against a couple other torque wrenches to make sure it's reading right. So far, so good. All right, those are torqued down. Next thing to do is to put in the Pto Drive Hub with the pilot bearing. Well, as you may have seen in one of my other videos, I ended up with this Pto Drive Hub, how I was replacing it. Splines were shot. I cross-referenced this bearing over to a steel sealed one instead of a rubber one. Hopefully that doesn't bite me. I thought it might be a little better. Just making sure it fits in. It does. There we go. I've had to replace a couple input shafts on over and unders, power shifts before. So I've kept the old one. They make a great clutch alignment tool. You'll see that in just a moment. Okay, got a couple of 3/8 bolts I use for alignment tools. Head's cut off, chamfered at the edge. Just makes everything go together nice. Oh, really isn't any particular spot this is supposed to go, but I do like that. There's draw bolt holes for taking it out. I don't have any video of that. These in to hold the clutch cover. And I can get that started. Still slide clutch disc in. You want the springs facing out. The dampener springs here. Shaft. Get it in the splines, get it in the pilot bearing. If you've got your factory clutch bolts, they got a bit of a shoulder on them, a bit taller head. Hopefully you still got them. Those are what you want to use, so when you're tearing it apart, don't just mix them in with everything else and forget where they are. I get my clutches done at a local clutch shop. And he puts these little plastic wedges in there to draw the fingers down for installation. That way you don't twist the cover if you don't torque it down or tighten it down evenly. Another way to do it, there should be a threaded hole in the pressure plate in one of these 3 different spots. You can put a bolt in there and pull that back. But what he's got here works pretty nice. He also, the nice thing about taking it to him, he's got a mill. So I take the flywheel, he'll mill my flywheel, get that all smoothed out. And then since he's got the clutch, he'll set it all up on the flywheel while it's there. And get it all pre-adjusted. And so when I get it here, see, it's already drawn down. All I gotta do is put it together and it's ready to go. I don't have to do any adjusting to it to adjust finger height, anything like that. I don't like to draw them one down and then the next, get them close and then kind of work your way around so you don't distort the cover. There's a lot of pressure in there. So that one's just starting to drop. All right, pull this out. Pull my little plastic finger spacer wedgers out. There we go. That's ready. Got the nuts all staked. If you did have to adjust the fingers, you turn these. But now I just got to replace the throwout bearing. I'm ready to slide stuff back together. Pull the throwout bearing assembly out of here. It just slides right off the forks and off the tube there. I always replace them, unless it's like something I knew I freshly replaced. This one does have a grease zerk fitting on it. You'd have to take the inspection cover off to even get to the thing. I'll probably leave it in there. At one point, Oliver had greasable throwout bearings. Then they found that one of 2 things happened. Guys over-greased them. The grease pushed out, through into the clutch area, and started making the clutch slip. The other thing was that they would mix greases. You should use a high temperature clutch grease that doesn't melt when it's really hot, because it gets pretty warm in here. And regular gun grease will. Well, not only that, regular gun grease will, chances are, will combine and chemically react with the throwout bearing grease and turn to rock and ruin your bearing in a short time. So if you are going to grease, try to get the high temperature grease and stick with it, or just don't grease it at all if you aren't sure about it. Lots of these bearings survive for a long time without extra grease. So I guess that's up to you. Get everything cleaned up here, knock the old bearing off, put the new one on, and put her back in there. And if you are, for some reason or other, taking this apart, when it's normal, that bolt head is facing back towards the over and under or hydropower. If you when you got it all assembled and your bolt head's on this side, you've got your fork in backwards, and you're not going to be happy when you put the rest of the stuff together. Just something to watch out for. And before I washed that up, before I put the new bearing on, just hooked up my grease gun that's got my clutch grease in it, and just to push out any old grease. And look at that thing there. It's not very fluid. The light brown stuff is the new clutch grease, but the other stuff just, something wasn't going the best there. Not that we'd had any problem with the throwout bearing, but just something to do if you have a greasable bearing is before you put the new one on, purge that old one out, get all that old grease out so you know what's in there. And then driving the new one on is pretty straightforward. Just set it on there and tap it on. It's always gonna, every time you use a clutch, it's gonna have pressure against it, so it doesn't take much of a tap to knock the old one off and the new one on, because using it keeps it on. Yeah, I guess I don't have to worry too much about that bad grease in there, because the replacement bearing I got crossed over to one that was a non-greasable. If it was greasable, there'd be a little notch in there somewhere that lined up with the little hole right there to tip my finger where the grease is, so that the grease could go into the bearing. So I'll just drive this on there, and that's what it's going to be. At least it was made in the USA. It's an Etna. Come on, focus. You can do it. Patent number, who wants that? A2526-1. Maybe you can cross-reference that on the internet, find one, save a few bucks. But your local AGCO dealer should be able to get you one. You'll know you have the right thing the first time. I will also pack a little of that clutch grease in here, this cavity where it slides on the tube. They can get dry in there and bind a little bit and grab on that tube and pull it right out of the front of the over and under cover, hydropower cover, whatever you got. So you don't want regular grease in there that's going to start melting at the high temperatures and getting all over everything. So I use the clutch grease. So like I say, kind of pack that chamber full so there's always something in there to lube that. Then just slide her back in. Got the clutch all mounted, ready to go. Got my new throwout bearing on there. Got some grease on the tube in there. Just a little bit of the clutch grease on the splines there. You don't want to get too much, it'll fling off. Kind of torn on that. Grease attracts dirt, and that could be bad in the long run. But one of the Oliver engineers told me once he puts a little molly grease on these splines right here to help the clutch disc slide and with disengagement. So I would think he would know what he's talking about. But from here, just a matter of, I got my handy dandy guide bolts in there to help guide it in through the plate and makes things go a lot easier. I'm going to slide the two halves together now. Got it all in there. Guide bolts definitely make a big difference. I just want to make sure it's even top to bottom. It looks pretty good. You want everything nice and square to be able to. I got the chain around the housing so I can turn the shaft, and so far, oh, there it goes. Well, it's engaged because I can only turn it one way. So from there, it's just a matter of bolting it up. Drawing it down, and it's mounted back on there. A little bit of a gap, but that's enough to where it started into the pilot bearing. But you don't want to force it together with bolts, because if it's not engaged in that clutch hub right, you're going to mess something up. But I'll see about getting those in. I got the over and under bolted back on, just about ready to drop it in. But one thing I want to do is the block heater doesn't work on this, and boy, it ain't going to get any easier than that to get to it. So I'm going to swap that out. I snagged one off from eBay. Not too hard to find on there. get that changed out, and I'll be ready to set her back in. Spun the old one out, put pipe dope on a new one, spun that in. I did, don't know why you can see it. I got some dielectric grease to put on the contacts. Hopefully slow down the corrosion. That seems to be probably the biggest place they fail, is on the contacts. And if you don't know where to get dielectric grease, go to any auto parts store and buy a light bulb or something for your car, and they'll try to sell you some. But I got that in. All I gotta do now is the electrical, well, probably another two-handed job, but get that in there, spin that nut on, and then I'm ready to put her back in the tractor. Time to put chain coupler on. One thing that really helps is try to have the motor as far ahead as you can on the mounting pads, but don't put the bolts in yet. That gives you just a little extra room to work with back there, and it ain't a whole lot of extra room, but it's enough to make the difference. Then once the chain's on, then I'll slide it back and put the motor mount bolts in. Notice how I got the head of or the eye part of the cotter pin facing the direction that's going to rotate. That's the better way to do it. Less likely to catch stuff that way. And then this metal gets weakened from you opening and closing it. So you're putting most of the thrust against the factory head. So best way to do them there. That one's all together and ready to slide back. But I do want to put the fuel tank in before I slide it back the rest of the way, because that's a tight fit and every little bit's going to help there too.